Woman, and this is Women Tonight here on JBC News Channel. This evening, we threw the spotlight on, the supply of legal wood. We're looking at the bottlenecks to supplying legal wood to the domestic market here in Ghana. I'm sure that you are aware that in the last 2 decades, the supply of legal wood to the domestic market in Ghana has been inundated with a number of bottlenecks, or you may call them challenges. Chainsaw lumbering, which is one of the key bottlenecks, has over the years been associated with the supply of illegal wood to the domestic market, and has become a major challenge for sustainable forest management here in Ghana. The domestic timber market in Ghana is typically a hub for illegal timber, with huge patronage from different wood users across the country and neighboring countries as well. We'll spend some time looking at these bottlenecks and how to rid them, how to get them out of the way so we can have supply of legal wood, and by extension we'll save our forests from further depletion. To help me do the discussion are 2 gentlemen who are well versed in this area. To my immediate left is Dr. Kwame Oduru. Dr. Kwame Oduru is Snr Research Fellow, Forestry Research Institute of Ghana. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. We are grateful that you have accepted to come and educate all of us on this very important matter. We are grateful.
Yeah, no problem.
And we also have Mr. Glen Asomaning. Mr. Asomaning is the Director of Operations, Nature and Development Foundation. He is also a PhD candidate for silviculture? When I saw it, I said I was going to ask you what exactly that meant. What's silviculture?
Basically forest management. That's it.
Okay, forest management. So why not just forest management? You people in academia like to complicate issues, so to speak. But we are grateful that you have also come here. He's also a forest management expert, and an expert also in agroforestry and natural resources. We are grateful that you have also joined us here. Let's start the discussion this way. Just a couple of weeks ago, here at GBC News, I particularly did a story about a portion of land. I mean, you may want to look at it from that tiny point of view, where about 10 years ago, there were trees all over that place. I went back to the same spot, and not a single tree could be found. However, I had seen houses springing up at the same place. And then the conversation about deforestation came up, and someone told me, because I came up with that idea, that it wasn't a forest to start with, and that the forest is in the bush, and so this cannot be part of deforestation. We were not experts when we were having that discussion. I'd like to start the discussion with you, Dr. Oduru. When we talk about the rate at which deforestation is affecting Ghana, what exactly can you tell us about that?
Thank you for the question. Deforestation is affecting a lot of things that we have in the country. For example, it affects people's livelihood, people who depend on the forest resources for their livelihood. People depend on the forest for potable water. So when the forest is no more, their livelihood is affected, and the water that they get from the forest is also affected. So that is one way, and that means that the economy, because the timber and the money that we get from the forest resources will be no more.
But the question is, what is the rate? At what rate are we depleting our forest reserves?
That is an interesting question. Over the years, we have estimated it to be about 2%, which means that every year 2% of our forest is gone, is lost. And that is what we refer to as deforestation.
And when we lose that 2%, are we able to replace that in any way? I've seen a number of organizations go around to do what they call tree planting exercises and so on. Do we have a way of replacing what we deplete?
In a way, yes. We can replant the forest, not to what it was before, but yes, we can replant the forest. Just to give you a few figures. When we say that we are losing 2%, from the year 2000 to 2010, Ghana lost about 1,150,000 hectares of forest. Within the same period, our tree planting, we have planted about 150,000 hectares. So if you do the mathematics, you notice that you lose 1,150,000 and you plant 150,000. So we are not able to put it back as at now.
That's woefully inadequate.
Yes.
When you look at the number. But let me bring Mr. Asomaning in at this point in time. So the question then will be, why do people engage in deforestation to start with? There must be some genuine reason.
Yes, so there are a number of, as you say, genuine reasons. People deforest for agricultural purposes. You want to set up a cocoa farm, for instance. I mean, what we have done for many decades in Ghana is to clear the forest for cocoa. It may not necessarily be a forest reserve, but when we talk of deforestation in Ghana, we are talking both areas that are reserved permanently for purposes of, as Dr. Oduru mentioned, for water protection and to provide other services to communities. To the whole, I mean, there are issues around climate change, which we talk about. We know the forest is one of the biggest sinks of carbon, as it is, or carbon dioxide, as it is. So bringing the forest down means automatically you are releasing a lot of carbon dioxide into the environment. And we know now almost everybody knows what the impact of climate change is. I mean, you bear with me that a couple of years ago you didn't need a fan in your room to sleep at night, but now you do. And most of us do. I mean, if you went to villages where, you know, a whole community could have just one or two people who would want to put up fans in their rooms, now almost everybody has one in the room. If you went to the villages, we know the issue of erratic rainfall. You know, in the past, farmers could really, you know, plan. They know that in this month we are getting our rains, we prepare our lands, get our seeds ready, waiting to go ahead and plant. And then they wait, and sometimes for 3 months there are no rains. The rains come, and they come so heavily, you expect it to be spread over a period. But in a matter of, 2-3 days, all the rains come, the whole place is flooded, and then there are no rains anymore. Yeah, so those are some of the impact of deforestation as we have them.
But see, I get the fact that people may engage in acts that lead to deforestation out of necessity, and so we need firewood. I mean, we don't have, or not all of us have access to LPG, so who cuts down trees for that? No, for us, this table we're sitting around is made of wood. Wood is needed to give us a set like the one we're sitting on right now to have this show. Out of necessity, man must live.
Yes.
And these are natural resources to enhance the life of man.
Yes.
Is there a point where we should stop using what is natural so as to save ourselves from the things you have described?
Yeah, so in that regard, let me take it from this other side. There's so as I indicated earlier, we have in Ghana our forests are partitioned into areas that are meant for, as in proper management. These are forest reserves. There are different objectives, some for conservation, some for extraction of timber. We also have what we call sustainable forest management. And this is what the whole of Ghana has ascribed to. What it means is that if we are practicing sustainable forest management, timber as it is, or wood as it is, if you left it for a number of years in the forest, they die anyway. So the experts over the years have come up with certain principles. So for instance, let's take a football park, one football park, which we assume to be 1 hectare. In that 1 hectare, if we're managing the forest properly, a company is giving 3 trees, a maximum of 3, most of the time 2. So you go in, it's a long process, they do what they call stock survey, they count, it will amaze you. But the forestry experts actually go in to count every single tree beyond a certain diameter. And then based on that, they select a certain number. Usually for a football park, they select and give out just about 2 or maximum of 3. So if we removed just those 2 or 3, of course we'll get our wood and our timber that we need. But this is the situation. Again, the problem of illegal logging. Legal companies are given the permission to go and remove those 2 or 3 trees. Then what happens? The illegal guys go sometimes in the night to then go and remove. In fact, they don't discriminate. They just go and remove anything that can be removed. So, I mean, if we practice it well, then we'll still have. In fact, I've been to forests which have been logged like as recently as 3 months earlier. You go in and it's as if nothing has happened in there, because just the 2 or 3 trees were removed, the right kind of equipment were used. So after 3 months, the place is covered. And how it works is that if you remove those 2 or 3, you know, it creates some kind of a space. So many trees which want to grow but don't get the opportunity to grow because there's no light, you know, now get the opportunity to grow. So if you went back after a few months, the place is almost covered and the forest still stays. In fact, by the laws of Ghana, you cannot go back to harvest that same space, that 1 hectare, until after 40 years. You know, so this is sustainable forest management, and this is what Ghana has set, you know, for us to all follow, you know. But then the situation, it's an issue of demand and it's an issue of supply. The demand outweighs the supply, and therefore the legal companies, in fact, there are so many issues that I believe we'll be talking about.
Yes.
But the demand has, you know, outweighed the supply, and then the illegal guys then go in to cut to meet the demand that we have, especially on the domestic market, and then the sub-regional market as well.
Doc, I saw you noting down
Yes.
some. Yes.
So basically what he is describing as the sustainable forest management, in the context of what you described, I would say, we will say wise use. So we are not saying that don't touch the forest. In fact, it generates a lot of revenue for the country. But let's make wise use of the resources. Let us use it in such a way that it will continue to be there. So that we'll not be talking about deforestation. It will surprise you to know that in the 1800s, we were talking about deforestation. And as a country, that was when we were supposed to have put measures in place to stop it. And we have continuously degraded our resources to such a point that it is no longer able to provide the services we described and the products that we described. And therefore, yes, we need wood, but if you are not careful, we may be using glasses or plastics instead of the wood, because we have not made a wise use of those resources.
How do we get to the... and my question then is, both of you have used the word wise use, I mean that phrase. How do you operationalize it for the understanding of that lay person out there who has an interest in wood, to understand that there must be a certain remit within which they should operate? Wise.
Yeah.
That for me can be very subjective.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you operationalize it?
Well, the first thing, Glenn has mentioned a number of things, that if you're a contractor and you're given a concession or an area of the forest to log, for every hectare, there's a number of trees that you can remove. There's a period within which you can go back to remove more. So in forestry, they will tell you that they've given you a yield. Those measures are the operational measures or standard that we need to use. If we follow them, if we follow the instruction, it's just like you have your normal activities, and you know that if I harvest a certain number of trees in my farm, I will be able to go back and get a gain. And now you go and you uproot them. They are gone. You are not making wise use. So it is following the measures to ensure that we would use it now and still have it for tomorrow. That is how we can operationalize it.
Right.
Yes. So to add a little bit to that, if you went to the market now, I mean, if you went to the timber market for someone who is building or needs wood, I mean, all he needs is wood. He goes to the market. What he gets, he buys. That's what happens. But now, if you went to any of the markets in Kumasi, in Accra, there are a number of them. There's a market in Ashama. If you went there now, they will tell you this is sawmill and this is bushcat. This is what they tell you. This is sawmill and this is bushcat. We assume that all the sawmill come from sawmills and therefore they've gone through some processes, so they are legal. Of course, not everything which has come from a sawmill is legal. But you can say with a bit of certainty that about 90% of those from sawmills are legal. Almost everything, almost 99%, of everything that will be pointed as bushcat is illegal. This is stolen timber. But the fact is that it is on the surface, it's cheaper. So you could get, they tell you, well, 2x6 bushcat, you buy at say 20 cedis, and then 2x6 sawmill, you buy at 25. And you know, you want to build, you get to the market, he tells you this is 20, this is 25. He tells you this is 2x6, this is 2x6. So what do? Most of the time we'll go for the cheaper one, which is the sawmill. As we go on, I will explain why that is actually more expensive than what we think is cheaper. I'll explain that concept later on. But that is it. Most people would go for the cheaper one, which is the bushcat, largely because they may not know the impact that they are by actually promoting the degradation of the forest. And this is most of the time the situation. But some people actually know that bushcat is stolen, and yet because it's cheaper, that is what they would go for.
So then the question then will be, why is that cheaper than the legal wood?
Yeah.
Why would the illegal one be cheaper? Have you found out why? And if yes, what have you done to address that? And I'm asking this because when you look at all other sectors, whether it's poultry production, cattle production, and so on, they always tell you that imported poultry is cheaper than local poultry. And that the factors are that you don't have subsidies for poultry feed in Ghana, whilst you have them elsewhere outside of the country, and therefore production is cheaper. So then I say the solution is give subsidies or put subsidies on poultry feed in Ghana. Problem solved. So you can translate that same logic to this industry. The illegal wood is cheaper. Why?
Okay, so let me give you a bit of an explanation on that. So any timber which is legal, right? So let's start from the forest. So first of all, for every legal timber fell, they pay what they call a stampage fee. You know, it comes from the word stamp. You know, when you cut a tree, what you find is a stamp. So it comes from that word, a stampage fee.
Yes.
That fee is distributed for everybody, including government takes a certain percentage. That is government, is the Forestry Commission, takes a certain percentage for the management of the forest. The traditional authority gets a certain percentage. The stool lands get a certain percentage. The district assembly, in fact, they get about 25% of the total amount of money that is, you know, taken from the stampage. So if you cut legally, already you are paying that fee. And then there are so many other fees that you need to pay. There are some taxes that you need to pay. Don't forget that these people are employing people in companies, first of all in the forest. They employ people in communities. They get to the companies, they are employing people. They are paying taxes, social security, income taxes, and all of that. So the cost of production or producing that you know, unit of timber definitely is cheaper. Now let's come to the other guy. He goes to the forest, all he needs is a chainsaw. He gets to the forest in the middle of the night, 12 midnight, he cuts. All he needs is people to carry it to the roadside, they put it in a truck, and then it's on the way to Accra. So this is why it's much cheaper with the illegal than it is with the legal. Yeah, so that's basically it. But as I said, I would again explain why, you know, if you balance it, it's actually, you think you are buying cheaper, but you're actually buying more expensive. And I will explain that to you.
You have to explain that paradox to us when I return to you. But Doc, so people and people like you who are researchers are aware that illegal felling of timber takes place in the forests. Mr. Asomaning has told us they operate at night, take these to the roadside, and then transport them to Accra. Timber cannot be transported to Accra using any other than the recognized routes, to the best of my knowledge. We have police officers dotted around all the routes, the major routes from anywhere to Accra. Yeah. If you have found out this, why don't we empower the police and the other security agencies to be able to track these illegal operators down? Why hasn't that been done?
It's a measure that has been done, that has been tried. What Glenn left out is the informal payment that these chainsaw operators also engage in. Of course, together with all those informal payment, it's still not up to the tax level of those operating legally. So over the years,
so by informal, let's call a spade a spade. You're talking about corruption,
yes,
and this corruption involves even those who are supposed to help fight the menace.
Yes.
All right.
So over the years, there's been a task force, military, police, together with the FC, Forestry Commission task force. And there are several allegations of corruption also leveled against them. So it's not like it's not been tried. It's said that it has not been successful. That has been the problem.
So at this point, must we throw our hands up in despair and just wait for some divine intervention, because those who are supposed to help fight the menace, are themselves compromised?
No, not at all. In fact, what NDF is doing, what I have been working on, is all geared towards finding a lasting solution to this illegal problem. So in the area where I work, we will call that there is a hard rule and then there's a soft rule. The hard rule seems not to have been working, where you send the military with guns and all that, but in the end, illegal logging is still happening. The soft one is appealing to the motivation and the conscience of those involved and trying to let them understand the consequences of their actions. Glenn says he will explain to you why we say that in the short term, illegality is beneficial, but in the long run, it is more expensive.
Yes.
So when people begin to understand that, for example, if you want to put up a building, and you notice that if you go to the market and buy 2x6 at 25 cedis and another one at 30 cedis, and you want to buy 25 cedis because it makes economic sense, in the long run, you spend more money.
Okay, so that's the paradox I said. Let Mr. Asomaning unravel for us.
Yeah.
So how?
Yeah, so it's simple. We have standards, in the forestry practice. So we have a whole division in the Forestry Commission called the Timber Industry Development Division. They have standards. For instance, if you want to cut, you've heard Dr. Oduru myself mention 2x6, right? So 2x6 is supposed to be 2 inches by 6 inches, and then it goes a certain length, right? So if you went to a sawmill and you actually picked a tape to measure, you'd actually see 2 inches by 6. And then the length, the sawmills would always give you something almost certainly more than 14 feet in length. In fact, most of the time you get something 16 feet. That's the standard you get. But the chainsaw, if you went to the market, most of the time, what you are supposed to get as 2, you get 1.5. And then what you are supposed to get as 6, you get about 5. And then the length, because they are stealing in the bush and then carrying it on their heads, the best length you can get is about 13. Now we did a simple calculation. In terms of unit volume, you realize that if you compare to the 20 cedis and the 25 cedis that we were buying legally, you're actually getting, it's actually cheaper if you bought the legal one. That is one way. Another one is the board. The board is also measured 1 inch by 12 inches, and then you have the length of 16. Most of the time, the chainsaw, you get 10 inches. Most of the time, the thickness is not that big, and then you get maximum of 13. Now, for most buildings, you realize that if you are putting up pillars, for instance, you need to get a certain dimension. You see? So if you bought the illegal one, what it means is that you'd actually require 2 pieces to get one side. So when you think you are buying cheaper, what it means is that whereas if you bought the legal one, which is the correct 12, you need just 1. This time, because you are using the 10, then they are now forced to now put 2 together to get the one side that you want. So whereas you would have bought, say, 10 pieces to do the job for you, you end up buying 15. Now, if you did the simple mathematics, you realize that you are spending more. That is the one side. Then the durability. So, chainsaw, he's using a chainsaw and trying to gauge, to try to get a straight line as much as he can. Most of the time, the wood, you have one side which is 1.1, you have another side which is 0.5, So if you use that for your door, for instance, you realize, in the dry season, you are in your room, you are sleeping quietly, you hear some noise and you think it's somebody in the room. It's actually the door which is creaking. Most of the time those doors made from such illegal wood, you have to replace them. after a while. You end up paying for the same thing, twice. So what we say to the public is that, yes, you think you are getting it cheaper, but if you went for the right dimensions, which now we can assume is a sawmill cut, then you're actually saving yourself money. So this is why we say that. Then you talk of the impact on the forest. So as I explained earlier, if you went by the sustainable forest management method approach, where you now support where we remove just 2 or 3 in a forest, the forest still stays and it continues to produce for us, in perpetuity. Whereas the chainsaw guys, as I said, will just go immediately after the legal guys have gone and just remove everything, including seed trees. Forestry have this phenomenon where they leave specific trees, very beautiful trees, so they produce seeds for plantations in that forest and then in other forests. These guys, when they go in, don't discriminate. They just remove anything that they see, especially if the tree is looking beautiful. They remove anything and then we're just destroying. And this is why we have, otherwise normally we'll have what we call degradation, where the quality of the forest actually goes down. But when companies go to remove legally and then other guys come in, then almost every timber there is removed, and then farmers are then tempted to say, well, if it's already gone, then why wouldn't we go in to also convert it to agriculture? So this is why we have the incidence of deforestation going so high in Ghana as it is compared to other parts of the world.
Perhaps, and later on when we have time, I'll return to the security issues and how that can be dealt with from the research that you have conducted. But I'm interested in knowing what the average demand for for wood is on the domestic market. Do we know?
Yes, for now it's estimated about 600,000 cubic meters of wood.
Okay, so again, you use the example of a football field.
Yes.
How many football fields of trees are we looking at?
I need to do a quick calculation for you on that one.
And I'm doing this for the sake of our viewers who do not understand the jargon, so cubic meters and so on, so we can get the real picture. A football field is one that almost every layperson is familiar with. Yes.
To meet the 600,000 cubic meters, if we have a forest area of about 2,000 hectares, we will be able to meet that demand.
That's huge.
That is huge. And interestingly, the plantation program that we are doing, the tree planting program that the nation is doing, the annual target was 20,000 hectares.
Per year.
Per year. 1 year, we will do 20,000. And 1 year, we need, for just the domestic market, not the exports, we need 2,000 of that. So you will notice that if we were following the rules, we will still be adding on to our forests. And the wise use, the sustainable use will come in. We will always be able to have wood for whatever we need. But here's the case, the chainsaw operator enters the forest and clears everything. They don't do any management that the timber operators will do. And in the end, we will not be able to achieve it. So that is the problem there.
So you're telling me that legal wood, were we to prevent the situation where people illegally fell these trees, that the legal operators alone will be able to satisfy the demand from the domestic markets?
That is my belief, yes.
So,
yes, Mr. Suman, you may want to come in.
Yes. So it's they say it's a chicken and egg thing. At the moment, we have a lot of companies producing for export market. And to be sincere, the export market pays much more than the domestic market. But in our work, we've also engaged lots of companies who would rather supply the domestic market than the export market because they feel it's much simpler, it's much more easier. But because you have so much illegal timber on the market, sometimes the incentive to supply the domestic market isn't there. If you spoke to the legal companies, they tell you, well, the price they are offering one is so low because they put so much illegal materials on the market, and therefore we are not competitive. So this is why we've been having these discussions around finding ways to eliminate all the illegal timber from the market, so that if all the illegal timber is eliminated, then those legal producers would then increase the volumes of materials that they put on the domestic market. That notwithstanding, I mean, in this document we have here, over the years, the trends have been changing. You know, Ghana, there's this program Ghana signed on to called the Voluntary Partnership Agreement, which is between Ghana and the EU, and the commitment is that any timber that leaves Ghana to EU must be legal. It must come from legal source. EU put in several their own laws, something called EUTR, EU timber regulation. If you imported timber that is found to be illegal into EU, it is confiscated, you can be jailed, you'll be fined, and then you can be jailed. So the VPA sort of provides some kind of access, some kind of a green lane, you know, for all exporters to go to send materials to Europe. Then Ghana, in signing that agreement, said that, well, yes, it's good, we are happy to send legal timber to Europe, but we also want to ensure that our own supply of timber is also legal. So then there was this aspect which is supposed to handle the legal market, which I believe we'll be talking about, the timber procurement policy.
All right. Somebody says, and the name is Ifua Nyako, and Ifua Nyako says, Movement, thank you very much for this development-oriented program. I'd like you to ask your panelists to simplify for us. Maybe give us just the highlights. What indeed are the bottlenecks to the supply of legal wood to the market, so we know who to attack when we see them selling illegal wood in town? Are we able to answer that?
Yeah. Yes, we'll be able to answer it. Simply put, for us at now, one of the key bottlenecks is the dwindled resources. Because of the illegality for a long period of time, our resources have gone down so much that we need to increase productivity. So that is one. Two is what we have already mentioned, is the fact that the cost component, the legal sawmills are not too much interested because there's so much illegalities, and therefore putting your legal timber will increase the price for which customers might not purchase. So these are two key ones. And the other one is the fact that they're also thinking about their utilities. Cost of production is high, and the merchants in the market who are now being educated through training programs like those that are being run by NDF and other institutions say that when they go to sawmills to even pay in order to source legal timber, it takes a very long time before they receive it. And therefore they end up, you don't want to lose your customers, so they end up going for the illegal one. So these are some of the bottlenecks that is facing the supply of legal wood to the domestic market.
So we've seen the bottlenecks, and I'm glad that the two of you are both researchers. So what are the recommendations that you will give in order to promote the supply of legal wood to the domestic market?
Yeah, so first of all, I think one of the main things, which is actually initiated by the government, not by civil society, you know, is trying to address the issue of demand. As I indicated earlier, it's a matter of demand and supply. If you produce so much illegal wood and nobody buys it, will you continue to produce? No. Yes. So this is what the government itself said through the Forestry Commission. They said, well, we tried all means using military. In fact, if you went to the field today, you see military task forces with Forestry Commission people armed with guns, you know, who are going around trying to stop people who are harvesting timber from the forest, and then those transporting timber on the roads. You know, if you went there today, you see that. But all of these measures have not been so successful. So one of the ways that government thought they would get this thing addressed is what they call the public procurement policy. And this is supposed to address the issue of demand. So why is it important? The initial thinking was, why won't you put some kind of requirement for anybody who uses timber to now show that he actually bought the timber from a legal source? Then they realized that there are so many private people who are also using wood. So they said, well, since the Forestry Commission is a government institution, has been mandated to do this kind of work, the government, I mean, the ministries, the departments, the district assemblies, you know, they are also part of government, isn't it? There have been studies which confirm that they are using about 50% of the total timber which is produced on the domestic market. So the question is that why won't you then cause government, projects to use only legal timber, just like it is done with other sectors? For instance, you need to show, in the case of assessment of before contracts are paid for, you need to show that you've actually paid your taxes, you paid your VAT and whatnot. Why won't you put in some kind of a measure so that for government projects, you actually demonstrate that you're actually using legal timber? This is something that government thought of way back in 2010. There have been several initiatives at it. Up to now, it has not been implemented. And this is one of the concerns that we have as civil society organizations.
If I may add just a point to it, and as a forester, somebody who loves what I do and also the forest, I think one other solution is for us, not only the government, all of us, to just increase the area and productivity of commercial forest plantations. We need to put in more effort in doing commercial timber plantations, enrichment planting. Those ones we cannot do away with. So together with what Glen has already described, where we are looking at enforcement, policy, legislation, we need to build a resource base as well.
Talking about policy, enforcement and legislation, is there a public procurement policy governing felling of trees and the whole of this industry? Do we have one? If we do, what does it say?
Yes. I want to say that Glen and his company have made a draft. Right. So we don't have the policy, but we have the draft. You want to speak about it?
Yes. So as I indicated earlier, the government in itself, the Timber Industry Development Division, actually started this, and of course you had to go through the ministry because they wanted a policy, which will bind every government contractor or anybody using government funds to acquire timber. So what happens is that contractors, as they are most of the time, they are looking for profit, of course. But in bidding for contracts, you cannot bid to say I'm going to use illegal timber. So what happens is they bid with the price of legal timber, and yet when they are giving the contract, they go to the market, and it's just an issue of supply. So he feels that I'm not getting it quickly enough, so let me just buy what is there. Sometimes people intentionally will go for the illegal one because it's cheaper, as in it's seen to be cheaper. So it's something which has been done, and as I said, we've pushed it for so many years, but it has still not been finalized and it's not being implemented, and that we think it's a big issue. If this is, for instance, carried through, then what it means is that demand for legal timber is automatically going to rise, which is then going to push the companies that are producing, to make timber available to the domestic market. Of course, the concern has been that what if you make this policy binding and then there's not sufficient timber on the domestic market? But as I indicated, over the years, since the last 10 years or so, there have been studies which have been referenced. At a point, I think in 2010 thereabout, there was estimated 80% of all timber sold in Ghana to be illegal. A recent study that was done shows that the number has come down to about 47%, or is it 43%, which is quite remarkable. So what it means is that, if you went to the market now, you've actually find a lot of, but we are still encouraging that we still put this measure in place so that at least we know that for all government contracts that are using taxpayers' monies, we know that they are actually going for legal timber, which would then trickle down, to the other side, and therefore, with time, we believe that of course, the point Doc raised is valid. If you have all of these and you don't have the resource base, what do you do? Then you are forced to import, or several measures have been proposed by the Forestry Commission, but I believe that first we should place the demand, and then the others will follow. This is the thinking.
Okay. Before I get to my substantive questions, Clement Wunye, he says the Ghana Wood tracking system of the VPA has discouraged the placement of illegal timber products into the market, but the domestic market is still a problem. You agree?
Yes.
Right. Okay, so let me return to my substantive, and Doctor, I'll bring you in at this point. Mr. Asomaning talks about a draft public procurement policy to govern logging and so on. But what are the potentials? Why should we be confident that this policy will be able to address the issue of illegal logging?
Okay, so the first thing is that they are encouraging government to use its purchasing power to source legal wood. And if you like, the government or government projects seem to be one of the highest users of wood. So the potential is the fact that progressively we will be able to source legal wood and push illegal wood aside. Because from that time, government contractors would not be, they wouldn't be bidding, putting legal wood prices in their tender and sourcing from illegal wood. They will be using legal wood. And that means that the sawmills that are not finding it attractive would now be putting out legal wood on the domestic market. And you and I, seeing the benefit and knowing that we don't want to pay for the same wood twice in a short period of time, will begin to also follow. And I believe in this PPP draft policy, they have made recommendations where you can source for wood. So private individuals could also go there. So the prospect, it has a high prospect in the sense that progressively it will not be, if you like, beneficial to be dealing in illegal wood. And the merchants themselves, because the government contractors that are buying more from you will no longer be buying. And you yourself will be forced to go and source legal wood to the domestic market.
But you see, one of the things is that here in Ghana, we do not lack laws and policies. In fact, what we lack is the enforcement of laws and policies. So everybody knows that the zebra crossing, it's for pedestrians, and yet you find a pedestrian standing for several minutes and cars just zoom past, even though we know what to do. It's the enforcement. So my question is, so it's beautiful. You've drafted a very beautiful policy, public procurement policy and so on. But as even you are developing that policy, have you been able to bring all the stakeholders within the industry on board? Because without them, the law will end up just in the books, but in reality, we'll have zilch.
So just before he comes in, because he started from the genesis, I came in as a researcher to assess what they have done. And what my team and I realized was that the contractors, the government contractors, the district assemblies, the merchants, they are aware of this policy. And that shows that they've received training and they have been brought on board in the development of the PPP. Of course, what's one of the things that remains is the huge number of people dealing in illegalities and now going to go into legal wood, and not everybody will be able to be accommodated. That is an issue that they are trying to solve. But I can confidently say that the key stakeholders, majority of all the stakeholders, were on board and they are aware of this PPP. Maybe Glenn wanted to
very quickly
talk about it.
Yeah, so as I said, this whole policy started in way back 2010. So it went to cabinet, as in the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, took it to cabinet for the first time. And then cabinet said, no, we think you should go and consult further. So this was where we came in. So we had, national consultation. Actually, we had 3 different zones. We had one in Accra, we had one in Kumasi, we had another one in Tamale. And the participants came from all the different associations, the builders, the architects, the surveyors. We brought all of them. And they all seem to, like the idea. They all know that it actually doesn't make sense to use the illegal timber because the final product you get is nothing durable. So they all supported this. And this was why we felt that the same document going back to cabinet for approval was going to go through. But then for some reason, because of concerns with the supply, to the domestic market, it was still referred for further consultation.
Okay. Someone, he says his name is MK Seidu. He says, please ask your panelists why we should be interested in timber issues since we can use aluminium trusses and so on?
Yeah. Well, Doc, you want to take that, but I can also start.
Okay, you can.
Yes, of course. We know the timber is a natural resource. It's a renewable natural resource. In fact, we have Ghana. I mean, if you went to other places and you saw what people are doing with timber plantations, you'll be amazed. I mean, I've gone to some place, I've seen land about 5 to 10 hectares, you know, and it's all a nursery of timber which is going to be planted. You know, timber is a natural resource, it's a renewable natural resource, which has several properties which no other material can compare. Now, we come to, you know, the life cycle of other products, like steel, like aluminium. Of course, if you look at the energy, we are talking about climate change. If you look at the energy that is involved in converting, you know, a certain unit of alumina or bauxite to the final product that you get, is so much in terms of the environmental damage. You know, there's no way it can compare with timber, and this is why we think timber is a material. Again, where we find ourselves as a country, we find ourselves in the tropics, and there are so many people who need that kind of environment to be able to set up tropical plantation, timber, which is highly valuable, and yet are not able to because they don't have the weather. We have the weather, and we are not taking advantage of it. And the example I'll give you, there's a building behind Accra, a shop behind Accra. If you went there, you see table like this, and they tell you what they used, you know, what was, and it's tropical timber. And if you saw the price of that, you'll be surprised that it's coming from the same timber that we don't regard. So timber is, especially tropical timber, is highly valuable. It's a renewable natural resource, and this is why we always encourage that over the use of aluminium and steel and others.
And just to add one more, the beauty. You know, there are a lot of plastics that are trying to mimic the beauty that we have in this nature. Wood is superior. So in addition to all the environmental benefits, just the aesthetics, the beauty, makes it also beneficial for us just to use our natural resources.
Great. But I'll return to the issue of the public procurement policy, because it's still a draft, and so it means that we're waiting for its approval. In the meantime, illegal logging is still going on. And so as you wait for that public procurement policy to be approved, what can be done to, as we wait, you know, deal with the menace?
So this is why we are so grateful that you have provided us this opportunity. For instance, we are talking to people, and I believe that there are so many people watching this program who otherwise would not know that there's actually a difference between, you know, the sawmill and then the bush cart. True. And then they may not know that buying the bush cart means you are contributing to the destruction of the forest, and then also increasing the temperature of in your own room, you know, increasing your electricity consumption and whatnot. So in the meantime, we've had different projects that have undertaken all forms of campaigns, you know, awareness creation to people, to let them know that there's actually a difference. We have engaged the people who engage in the illegal activities themselves in trying to push them. So the numbers that I gave between 2010 and now, for instance, you realize that there were so many of them who were actually engaged in illegal timber, who have now transitioned from illegal timber to legal production. You know, that is also an option. They call it artisanal milling. So they get small mills, but these are stationary mills. So the Forestry Commission officials can actually visit them and ensure that the timber they are using is actually sourced from legal sources. Yeah. So these are some of the things that we are doing.
Yes, and one additional point is that, and in this sense I'm referring to the government, the Forestry Commission, they are not waiting for this to be done, they're also still working. And one of your the members who asked the question talked about the wood tracking system. So now the Forestry Commission is operationalizing this such that if you don't source your wood from a legal source, you will not be able to export it. So that is one aspect. They're also trying to organize illegal operators to go into tree plantation, commercial tree plantation, so they can themselves have wood to work. So there are a number of measures being taken while we are waiting for this also.
And I got some information from Mr. Sumini's office through Margaret, and it says between 2000 and 2015, Ghana lost forests the size of about 138,000 football fields. And so if we put 138 football fields together, it could amount to an area bigger than some communities in Ghana. That is scary for me. What are the implications?
The first implication is that our forest resources are gone, together with all the associated benefits. 2000 to 2015, 2010, 2015 was a turbulent time, I would say. It was also the same period when, starting from President Kufuor, where we started with the plantation development programs. What we need to do now is to halt this deforestation. And all the measures we've talked about, the wood tracking system, the PPP, policing, the resources, are all geared towards trying to halt the degradation and then the deforestation. Then the plantation is to increase the resource base. So what the government is seeking to do is that we want to stop these minerals, and therefore we want to restore all the benefits that the forest is producing. But the simplest implication is that when we lose this amount of forest, you are losing it together with all the benefits, the ecosystem services, the livelihoods, the watersheds. We've lost it.
And we are running out of time, but so let's wrap up in the next 5 minutes. And Mr. Asomaning, I'll begin with you. In all of this conversation, we've drawn attention to the fact that there is illegal wood out there, and there's legal wood. Okay, you've told us the cheaper ones may be the illegal wood. But beyond just being cheap, how will the ordinary person be able to tell? Because he has just seen a shop where wood is being sold. How will such a person be able to attest to the fact that the dealer, number one, is a registered legal dealer, and be able to differentiate between that person and one who is not? What kind of evidence would there be to show for such persons to make a decision as to whether to deal with illegal people or not?
So there are different ways to look at it. So one is that any legal seller should be registered with the Timber Industry Division of the Forestry Commission. But as you know, if you went to a market and then you ask them to show evidence of, the person would be apprehensive. So the simplest thing we say is to look at the wood. If you ask them, you went there and asked any dealer, he will show you, he'll point you that this is sawmill and this is bushcat. Automatically, the bushcat is considered illegal. Except, I can say sometimes, just say about 1% of the bushcat can still be legal. But most of the time, the bushcat is illegal. And how do you know this is bushcat? You see the teeth of the chainsaw. Usually, look at the dimensions. The dimensions are usually, not uniform. Most of the time, the length is, maximum you get is about 13 feet for any piece of wood. So that is the simplest way that you can use to determine whether it is legal or illegal. And then of course you want to roof your building. So your carpenter will tell you that get 2x6, get me 500 pieces of 2x6. You can, once you go to the market, you can ask to check the dimensions. And most of the time, the illegal ones, because they want to maximize, the illegal ones are much smaller than the 2x6. But most of the time, the legal ones have the actual dimensions that you have. So that's the simplest way to determine whether the timber is legal or illegal. But of course, there are some, you get some with proper dimensions, proper length and everything that is still illegal. But that is difficult to tell. So the Forestry Commission, as in the TIDD, together with us and other organizations like the Kumasi Wood Cluster, we are trying to pilot some. We have part of the project that we are running to pilot so that we'll list all companies, all the sellers that are legal. We'll list all of them on a certain site, so that before you even go there, you can check and then you know that this guy is actually legal or it's not legal. That should come out in the next couple of months.
No problem. But Mr. Asomani, his name is Eugene Ofori. He says, Moomin, your panelists are being very diplomatic in their submissions. The truth is that the Forestry Commission is not up and doing. So, for example, when you go to a pharmacy or even people who sell food, the Food and Drugs Board that is up and doing is able to deal with people who deal with illegal food products. Why can't the Forestry Commission fish such people out and punish them? It's as simple as that. Is it as simple as that?
It's not. So this is the situation, and it comes from a historical antecedent that has happened in the past. What happened was, so now if the Forestry Commission found someone cutting timber illegally in the forest, they arrest them and they confiscate the timber. If they found a truck on the road carrying illegal timber, but once it gets to the market, it becomes difficult. In the past, they tried it, and it resulted in some shooting incidents. And then since then, nobody really, as in terms of politically, nobody really wants to go. Because the point is that if you've allowed the material to get all the way to the market, why then do you come to blame me? You know, so this is what has been the biggest issue, and this is why the Forestry Commission, everybody have tried to find this other way around solving the problem of looking at, you know, the policies and then other things to address the situation.
Before I come to you to wrap it up for us with, by giving us recommendations as to how to get the bottlenecks out of the way, Frank Kwesi on Facebook, he says, I disagree with Glenn somehow. There are also some illegal sawmill cuts on the market. So it's not just the sawmill can also be illegal according to him. TIDD should go onto the market and we'll see undersized wood coming from sawmills. I have seen it many times in sawmills. That's a continuation of that message from Frank Kwesi as well. So he says it's not wholly true that the illegal ones are always legal. There are illegal ones within the ones that you have defined as legal. Doc, let's wrap it all up. So what's the way forward in all of this?
I think a few pointers that will help us. We'll still continue. We need to continue to push the PPP for it to be accepted by cabinet, then try to implement it to see if we can progressively push illegal logging away. The second one is that we need to make every effort to increase the area of commercial plantations, and I always say that productivity is not just the area, we need to manage it so that we'll increase the source through which we'll get resource-based increase such that we'll have enough timber. The issue of wood tracking system, the Forestry Commission will continue to, should continue to work on it such that if you source it from an illegal source or you cannot trace it to a sustainably managed source, you cannot export it, and that means that you cannot, it will be a disincentive to continue to buy from the illegal sources. Just to touch on the final submission, I think that the problem is much bigger than perhaps the person is anticipating, and the forests are scattered across the country. Forestry Commission has such a number of staff, and they cannot police all the forest. And in most cases, they have tried to police it. And you see, it's not the same people who are doing the illegalities that have done it for 20 years. There are new players entering in every year, several of them entering in. So it's not that easy. Personally, as a scientist, as a researcher, I think that the government can do more, but they are also doing their best in some circumstances. Without being political, I would want to say that with just the wood tracking system, if it's operationalized well and it's working well, it will be able to solve part of this problem for us.
Thank you very much for coming, gentlemen. I've been speaking with our officials from the Nature Development Foundation, Mr. Glen Asomaning, and of course I've also been speaking with Dr. Kwame Oduru, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the Forestry Research Institute, and we've been looking at the ensuring legal timber supply to the domestic market. Thank you very much for being a part of the show, and I hope that you have learned something. Next time you go to buy timber, look out for the legal one, and in doing so, you'll be discouraging the illegal logging, which is fast depleting our forests, which of course we all know have severe implications on the environment and on our lives as well. I co-produced this show with Margaret, who works for the Nature Development Foundation. I thank you for helping in the production process, Lizzie, and the rest of the production team. We are grateful to you. We'll see you again tomorrow, and we'll bring you another edition of Moment Tonight. Have a very good night. Bye-bye.
And the voices that